So I'm going to be taking these apart and I'm going to be pulling my bearings and I'm going to be doing this all properly. I've got new bearings, got new seals. I don't know if I'm going to need new bearings or not. I probably will, considering how that's all fitting together in there, but we're going to see. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Some of you guys probably watched my episode where I rebuilt my banana brakes, and in that episode I had kind of just done like a quick check and re-grease of the bearings. I got a little bit of criticism in my comments because of that, but the reason how come I did that was because, as far as I knew at that time, the wheels had come apart when they were relaced and the bearings and everything was checked properly and put back together properly. That was my assumption. It's been a few years since these wheels were laced, and typically when my dad relaces wheels, he will take the hubs apart and he'll rebuild them, do all that stuff all at the same time so that the wheels are just done. Now, this wasn't my dad's project to begin with a couple years ago. It was my brother's. So I had just went under the assumption that things were done in the way that my dad would have typically done them. But because I didn't really know, I decided it'd be a good idea just to call my brother and find out actually what he had done, because I wasn't too sure and I didn't really feel super comfortable going on an assumption anyways. So I called him and he didn't actually remember how the bearings were. He didn't actually even remember if he had the hubs apart or not. So he couldn't even tell me if the bearings were good for sure. So I decided to check the Endplay. So I put the axle in and I put a dial indicator on it and I went to check the Endplay, and one of the wheels had absolutely zero Endplay at all, while the other wheel had twice the Endplay that it should. So that is not good. And it's a good thing that I called my brother, and it's a good thing I decided to double check that stuff and didn't just go under the assumption that this was done properly the way that my dad typically would do wheels, because apparently when this was all being put together, there was something that prevented. I don't know if my brother just couldn't get the bearings at the time or what, but it wasn't done. So now it needs to be done, because clearly no Endplay or twice the amount of Endplay that you would want on your bearings is not a good sign. So I'm going to pull these apart and then we're going to put it all back together with new stuff, the way that it should have been done to begin with. Right, so it's a quick enough job to do anyway, so I might as well just do it properly and be done with it. Why can't I get that out? Oh, whoa. Okay, that seal was pretty tricky to get out. Definitely ended up wrecking it. So, yeah, that's okay. That's why you buy new seals. All right, let's see if this seal comes out any easier. Holy! Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Like, hardly strong enough to do this. Oh man, almost punched myself in the nose there really hard. Would have really sucked a lot. Okay, looks like I'm doing the same thing with this one that I did with the other one. So, plan B. I'm just going to try to fold this thing over on itself now that I've kind of broken a chunk of it away. Are you gonna come out yet, you seal? There we go. That's how you do it. That's how you do it. Gotta get caveman with it, then you just gotta get caveman with it. Pull this out. And I'm just making sure to keep all my parts separated. Okay, I'm all set up to push my bearing races out. I've taken them out of this side already, so I'm just removing it from the side that's sitting on the bench right now. Now, I don't have some kind of special homemade hillbilly tool for doing this job, so I can't help you guys out if you don't have the proper tool. I've actually got a proper fancy tool that's made by Shims that I'm going to be using. It's in here already, so I'm not going to take it out to show you guys, but this is basically a bar, and then it has what kind of the same kind of end that you'd have on like a ratchet handle, and then this is what that end kind of sits in. Is actually two pieces like this. These ones are broken, but the ones I've got in there right now are not. And this will actually go in, so say that your bearing is here like that, your race. So this will actually go inside of the bearing race like that. And it's in 2 separate pieces like this because when you push the bar into the center there, it actually spreads these out, and then it'll actually grab onto the bearing race with this edge here. And then that makes so you can actually just use this as a drift and push those races out. So that's what I'm all set up to do here. And when you're doing this too, I've actually got it supported on the hub. So I've got a couple 2x4s just sitting on the flange where the rotor would go. And that's because I don't want to have the wheel supported on the wheel itself because I'm going to be pounding on the hub. I don't want to be putting all that force on the spokes. So you want to actually support the hub itself so that your force is going into the 2x4s rather than into your spokes. There we go. Okay, I'm just gonna do the same exact thing to the other wheel, and then we'll be able to just clean everything and check it over real good to make sure that everything is good. And if it's not good, we will replace the bearings. Okay. Looks like somebody tried to take some of the end play out of this wheel, but they didn't take enough out. All right, I'm just gonna drift out these races. Okay, I've got everything apart now. I'm just gonna clean everything. It's funny, you guys are always telling me I need a parts washer, and I actually have like a big washing tank here, but it's kind of just in the corner. It's used as a shelf more than anything. I don't even actually have any solvent in there right now, and that's just because for as often as I need to use solvent to clean parts, it doesn't make sense having this thing all full of solvent just fuming up this shop that's not super well ventilated. So that's how come I'm always just using a tray end cleaner, you know, then I don't have like a big bin of solvent sitting in my shop evaporating into the atmosphere. So I use bins to clean my parts because it just seems to work better for now. Now it is time to wash all of these parts. Okay guys, in my typical fashion, I'm using pre-used solvent to clean my bearings because they're really greasy and I don't want to use like brand new cleaner to clean them. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just putting it in these containers and then I can just shake it about and get all the grease out of these bearings, and then I'll clean them again with clean stuff. I'm making sure too to keep everything nice and separated, and I even have my pan marked front and rear because I want to figure out what I can do to resolve the issue of the front having 0 end play. So if I can swap some parts around, like these spacers that sit between the bearings, maybe I can swap those around and get a little bit of end play going on the front. Yeah, I'll have to see. So I just ran out to get some new shims for the wheels because I want to put some end play in that front wheel since it had no end play at all, which is kind of crazy to me. The rear wheel, actually, I discovered after double checking, the rear wheel was actually within spec, so it had a decent amount of end play. It's supposed to be between 0.004 and 0.018. So the rear wheel was good because it was sitting at 0.008, but I took it apart anyways. The shims that were in there were actually kind of wrecked, and I'm just going to show you guys what I'm talking about. These are the shims I took out of that rear wheel. I don't know if you can kind of see that. You can see how that's actually been like squished. So that's no good when you're shimming something. Like this is a new shim, and this shim does not move like that at all. It's perfectly flat, and that squished shim, like that's just an example of why you need to use proper torque specs, especially when you're putting something together that's so critical, like your wheels. There's a reason why there's torque specs. You don't just do stuff up as tight as it can go because you're gonna wreck stuff, and this is a good example. These shims are junk. They might be good for something that's not critical. Everything does seem to be good. The bearings are actually good. I've got 3 of the races pressed in already, and this is the last one I've got to put in, and the bearings all feel good. They all look good. There's no like scores or marring or anything like that. They don't feel lumpy. They all feel good. I cleaned all the grease out of them so that you can actually feel how the bearing itself feels, and everything's good, which is good because I didn't want to replace these bearings. They're nice, made in the USA, Timken bearings, and the ones that I was gonna replace them with were Drake Specialties, which say made in India on the package, and I just like made in the USA. You know that it's good quality, so I'm glad that I can keep my Timken bearings. And also I did measure my spacers, so I used my dad's nice digital micrometer for that, and he's actually got like a nice, I don't even know how to say that, Mitoyo micrometer, got a nice digital micrometer, and we measured the spacers and everything, and the front wheel had a little bit of a smaller spacer, so I'm going to swap those spacers and then see where we're at with that. And just for reference sake, I'm just going to show you guys too how I keep track of all the parts, because it is critical that your bearings, if you're reusing your bearings, you make sure that they go back in the same races that they came out of. So this is how I keep track of everything. I just have this big piece of blank paper. I just section everything off as I have it here, and I just label it, and I keep all of the parts in their section, and that just makes it super easy to keep track of everything. And then if you need to do some math, you can jot that down on here as well. Yeah, it's just for reference sake in case you guys want to use the same idea. Anyway, enough talking. Let's hammer in some bearing races. So I got one last race to put in, and I'm actually just putting a little tiny bit of grease just on the end of the hub here. The manual does not say to grease to put your races in, but it does say to grease your seals. But I'm gonna just put a slight film of grease in there for my race as well, just to kind of help it move. Make sure that everything is like super clean. I wiped my hubs out really well with a clean cloth that does not leave any particles or anything like that around. And pop my bearing race in there. And I'm using a nice tool for this job. Actually, this is a Shims made in the USA. We like made in the USA or Canada if you can get it. Shims, we all know Shims. We all know they make good stuff, but this is actually a bearing installer from Shims, and my dad's had this forever, probably longer than he's had me. And this is the most critical part. You want to make sure that everything is super straight. And I'm standing on a crate so that I can actually like see this straight on and get good like centered wax on this bar, because I'm too short to do it like a normal person. All right, now that my races just dropped down the lip of the hub there, I'm gonna actually just start using a metal hammer so that it goes a tiny bit quicker, and I don't wanna hit it super hard. I'm just gonna be tapping it in a little bit at a time. You can actually hear when it gets to the bottom too, which is nice. So next step now is just to do a little bit of math and make sure I'm using the proper shims. I've just got my rear wheel here, guys, and I'm just checking the Endplay. And I actually decided just to first check it with the bearings dry without any grease in, just in case I had to take them out and put them back in. I didn't want grease getting everywhere. So you want to have between 4 thou and 18 thou for Endplay. So I'm just using a dial indicator to check the Endplay, and I've just got it on my axle here. And it's actually a good thing that I was doing all this too, because the axle that came out of here was actually bent like pretty good. Like you could see how bent it was if you spun it like free in the bearings. So I'm using a straight axle now that's actually not bent. Okay, so I've got everything torqued properly with whatever spacers I would have in there normally. I'm just gonna show you guys what I've got for Endplay here. And I've got just, you might not be able to see it very clearly, but I've just got just over 4 thou for Endplay. Almost 5 thou actually. So that should be good. Now that I've got everything mocked up and fitting properly in the hubs the way that I want it to with the proper amount of Endplay, I'm just going to grease my bearings. I got the front wheel set up so that it has basically like the same amount of Endplay as the rear wheel. So they've both got just over 4 thou, which is pretty good. I want to make that Endplay as minimal as I can, and I kind of want to go on the lower end of what the recommended specs are. So that's where I'm at right now. I cleaned all of my parts again. I rinsed my bearings bearings again with clean brake cleaner and blew them out with the compressor because they've been handled so much, put in and out of the wheels and everything. I wanted to make sure that they're all clean. So I'm going to pack these bearings actually the old school way. I guess it's probably the way that most people do it, but some people have like fancy bearing packers and stuff. And I've used bearing packers, but I don't actually like to use bearing packers because I'd rather just take off a pair of gloves and throw them in the garbage than try to clean some tool that's all covered in grease. So I'm just putting a pile of grease in my hand. So I'm just going to show you guys how to do this properly. So you're going to take your grease in your hand like this, and you want to pack it in the more open end of the bearing here. You can see how there's a bigger gap here than there is here, and you just want to pack that in and kind of like scoop in, push it in. Keep scooping and pushing it in, and you want to do that until it starts actually pushing out of around the bearings and out from the other side. Then you know you've got enough grease in there. It's going to be a little time consuming to do it this way, so I guess for time's sake it's nice to have a bearing packer, but I don't mind doing it this way. It doesn't really take that long. So you can see the grease is actually starting to push out the other side there. So I'm going to go all the way around here and make sure that's nice and packed. Okay, so this one is good. You can see that the grease is actually coming all the way through to the other side there. And actually I can see a little air bubble there, it looks like. So I'm gonna push a little more in that end. So that one's done. And I've made sure that everything here is clean, and I've kept everything in order, as you guys can see. So I'm just gonna do these all, and then yeah, I'll see you guys when it's time to put the wheels back together. Ready to start throwing these wheels back together. Here. This is not the brake side, this is the other side. So I want to put the rear other side in it. Okay, so I'm just going to start putting together my first wheel, and I'm going to put a good layer of grease inside the race before I drop the bearing in. Okay guys, so when you go to put your bearings in, you want to actually apply like a pretty liberal amount of grease to the race, so the bearing's sitting in like a good pile of grease. I've already got my bearing and seal and everything put together on the other side of the wheel, but I just wanted to show you guys this side because you're going to want to put your spacer in there after you build the first half of the wheel. So you want to put your spacer in, and then on top of your spacer is where your shims are going to sit. So the shims just actually sit on top of the spacer. If you don't have your spacer in there, shims will just fall right through. And then when you got that in there, then you can just give a good thick layer of grease into the race. So I'm going to put a thick layer of grease on the race. Throw my bearing in, squish that down, pretty good. And now I'm gonna fill even more grease up in there. All right, so now I've got a good thick layer of grease in there. I'm gonna actually fill even more grease in there on top of the bearing too. I'm gonna put a lot of grease in here so that underneath the seal will be all nice and packed full of grease too. Now I've got a lot of grease in there, and now I can put my seal in. You want to give a good thin coat of grease on the seal just so that it slides in place better. I would say put like a thin layer of grease inside the hub there where the seal's going to go, but it's already pretty dang greasy. Okay, I'll get that in there as straight as I can get it, and that's good. Just kidding. Okay, so I'm gonna have to push that in there the rest of the way. I'm gonna just use actually this washer that would sit on the outside of the seal to help me get the seal in there. So I'm gonna just tap it in lightly with my hammer. Right now it's not perfectly straight, so I'm just gonna tap it to straight. And then once it's relatively straight, I'll start going around in kind of a circular motion. And then once it's past the rim of the hub, now I'm gonna just let the washer over the edge of the hub there, and I'm gonna work around like that till this washer comes down and actually touches the hub. And then that just helps me to ensure that it is still going in straight. So just working around. So now it's all evenly past the lip of the hub there. It's all even. So now I can start tapping it in. And you want your seal to be from 3/16 to 1/4 inch from the opening of the hub. I'm just making sure to keep checking that it's actually going in straight. Looks like it's probably about far enough, so I'm gonna just double check. And I'm gonna just take my ruler here. All right, so we're almost at 1/4 inch there. Same with there. About same there. Right, looks even all the way around. My seal seems to be in there straight. Okay, now I can put my spacer in. Spacer just pops right in there. There you go. And then my washer, and then my ring goes on over top of it all. These are not actually snap ring pliers, but they work so good. Like, these are probably the most handy little pliers we have in the drawer. I don't even know where they're from or what they're for, actually. I'm gonna clean up, and I'll be back to put the wheels on the bike tomorrow. So I'll see y'all there. Pretend like I never did that. Why am I using my not gloved hand? Dang nabbit. Get on there, you stupid thing. Grease, get out of my way, man. I can't see anything. Get the heck off of there. Why is there so much freaking grease in my way? My hand's covered in grease. Okay, everything's greasy. I just have to get over it. Got a little grease happy there. So that's what I want to do. Clean up. I don't want to go to bed. Bed, stupid. Who goes to bed at a normal time? I'm just really freaking annoyed right now. Probably because I want to go to bed. And I don't know why I'm saying all this useless, stupid information. I don't even need to say all that. Hopefully that was helpful to some of you. Hopefully Angel shuts up. Why you gotta do that to me, bird? I really didn't want to have you on my shoulder. Really did not want to have you on my shoulder right now. This glove is wrecked already. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel.